What you need to know is that when that fabric arrives, I will be dropping everything to make Big Frog. It is time. So cleared the table as soon as the fabric arrived. That's exactly how my table looks. It is very, very sparsely populated and not entirely covered in stuff that I didn't particularly want to shove to the floor. And then throwing the pattern on top dramatically for a video effect, which didn't work because the image of the frog was on the wrong side. So I found the image of the frog and then finally got my dramatic effect. Well done me. And then just cutting out the pattern. And it's just a tissue paper pattern, just like any dress pattern that you would buy commercially. I am using fabric shears to cut out the pattern, but they are very blunt fabric shears and they are struggling to cut the paper, let alone fabric. I do need to get them sharpened. They came from my aunt's craft stash, fabric stash, and she had never had them sharpened, I can tell. So it's a bit of an effort, but also don't cut your paper with fabric shears. So these are the pattern pieces. I've got the hind legs, the arms, a lower body and an upper body. And then there's the upper body. Yes, I knew I'd get there eventually. With 3 darts in it, just to be fancy. Quite a lot of darts in this frog. And then the eye pattern, which I didn't cut out at this stage because I knew I'd lose the pieces. So I cut that out later when I was ready to cut the eyes. And last but not least, the eyelid. And then it was just a case of cutting out the fabric. Now, what I didn't do was fold the fabric in half because you can do 2 pieces at a time by doing that, but then the pattern direction would have been different on each side and that would have been annoying. So I did it all one at a time because I'm dedicated. And again, just cutting out. I needed lots of legs and arms because there's the top fabric. I've fallen over my face somewhat here in my voiceover. The top fabric and the under fabric. So 2 top arms and 2 bottom arms, 2 top legs, 2 bottom legs. And this is something that I think of. So this is cutting into a point like this from the outer edges. So you go into the point like that. And then rather than trying to get your scissors around, you just come in from the other point. And I learned that in 1983 from my prep teacher. And I think of him every time I have to cut out a star or a toe shape. So that's just a little tip for you there. It's much easier to cut if you're not trying to get your scissors around that sharp angle. And then we're all cut out and ready to sew. That's both the top pieces, the upper bodies, the limbs, the arms. You can't really tell because it's all blending into one, but I promise that's the arms, hind legs, another hind leg. And again, you can't tell because it's all just merged into one, but they're definitely separate. Underbody is just one big piece with a seam in it, and then I've delicately placed the under legs. Now, to mark the darts, I did think about cutting them out of the pattern, but the pattern, because they're so close together, I didn't want the pattern to fall apart because I've cut the darts out. So this is how I generally mark darts anyway, and that is to find the point of the dart and then mark to the edge with a ruler, because then I can fold it and sew it, and I also have a sewing line. I'm using biro here. Sometimes I use, fancy proper sewing tools like disappearing ink pens. All of the limbs stuffed. And once they're stuffed, they are pinned to the upper body pieces, which are coming very soon. Where are they? There's one. Oh, well, no, first of all, I need to sew those together. So then once I've done that, I basted the limbs onto the edge so that I didn't have to worry about pins inside the body, and then folded all of the limbs in so that it would make a kind of sandwich. And the limbs, when the seams are sewn, the limbs would be caught in the seam around the outer edge. So then the underbody just goes on top of everything like a big, weird, lumpy sandwich. Doesn't that sound appetizing? And then I spent quite a lot of time picking up pins because that was not a well thought through thing to do. Everything pinned together and then under the sewing machine, which was a bit nerve-wracking because there is quite a lot of bulk to get through. And I did realise at this stage that I had overstuffed the limbs, and the logical thing to do would have been to undo the basting, take some of the stuffing out, and then rebaste them. What I actually did was cram things under the machine, which for the most part, to my credit, did work. So it's not the way you should do it, but it is a way that worked. And then turning it all out again, turning it right side out through the big gap at the back, which is a very big gap because you have to get these feet through. So it's a bigger gap than I would normally leave. That's me trying to get some light on myself. I spent a lot of this project getting light on myself. So yeah, then just turning it all right side out. So you have to pull all the limbs through that big turning hole at the back of the frog. And that was slightly sped up because I cut a bit out because it took a while. And making sure that all the limbs were attached, which they mostly were. So they're all there and attached and looking like limbs, pulling out the face there so I know everything's smooth. That's all attached. That's all attached. That's not. So there's a bit of a gap there where I missed catching it in the basting. So I went over that again and managed to catch it, but there is a bit of a seam dimple on the rear leg because I should have unpicked it and I didn't. I should have unpicked it and started again, and I simply didn't. And then it's a case of putting stuffing in the frog, quite a lot of stuffing into the frog, and then sewing up the turning hole. I'm using a curved needle here to do a ladder stitch. Now the curved needle is just being a bit pretentious, really. You don't really need a curved needle. I find it a bit easier later on, but you don't need to use one for sewing up a turning hole. And I'm just being pretentious. And then adding more stuffing as the hole closes up to make sure that everything's still firmly stuffed. And then it is eyeball time. So that's placing the, it's not the iris, is it? Yes, it is the iris. It's the iris in the middle of the eye, using the pattern as a guide. And then I just did some blanket stitch around it with sewing thread, which was very straightforward, except I love blanket stitch, but I can never remember how to get it started. I always have to look up how to start blanket stitch. I've done it so many times, but that first stitch always falls out of my brain. Put the pupil in the same way, and then it's a gathering stitch around the outer edge of the eye to pull it all into a ball shape. Well, sort of a ball shape, a little bit ball shaped. And then stuffing, of course, more stuffing than that. And then here's where the curved needle really comes into play, or is really useful, is what I should say, to get into little tight areas like this, attaching the eye and attaching the eyelid, because it curves up and it's easier to grab. I find it a little harder to handle than a straight needle, but it is definitely worth it for these kind of tight area stitchings. Are you ready? I don't think you're ready, but I'm going to show you anyway. Big frog. Look at the size of my frog. He's so big. Is he in shot? Oop, no. There we go. That was deliberate physical comedy and not me just being a bit of a klutz. There's Big Frog, and there's Big Frog's belly on the underside. Nice cream colour for the belly. So, Big Frog is complete. Big Frog is amazing, and I love him. I'm going to take my hood off. It's a little bit warm, actually, for autumn. Anyway, Big Frog is mostly done according to the pattern, with the exception of the eye zone. Like, most of the eye is different. So this pupil here is supposed to be round according to the pattern. That's me going like that, in case you're not sure what round means. So I just shaped the pupils a little bit more like froggy eyes. There's supposed to be eyelashes on the eyelid, which is weird for a frog. So I just went, no, that's weird, I'm not doing that. And this white part here, which I'm not going to show you close up because it's rough, is supposed to be felt, but I've just used the belly corduroy, but I've flipped it so that the texture's on the inside, so it's sort of the smooth side is out. The reason I've done that is because I lost confidence in this orange when I got it home, because I bought the orange before the fabric arrived. So I was looking at it thinking that might be a bit much, it might be a bit orange. So I went back down and bought some green, which wouldn't have worked at all. So I don't know why I've bought that. I'll do something else with it, it's fine. But I also bought a very light green to be the white of the eye. And that looked rubbish with the orange. So it's just the belly corduroy again. And the other thing that I wanted to point out, just in case you hadn't noticed, because I'm really, really proud of myself about it, is that I've got the directional pattern running the same direction all the way along. So I've managed to get the directions running up the arm and up the leg like that. See? This back leg took a long time to figure out how to get that pattern running the right way. So I'm very pleased, and just in case you hadn't noticed, I just wanted to point that out. So Big Frog is amazing. I will put I'm very pleased with my Big Frog. So I will put the pattern information in the description. It is devastatingly a vintage pattern because it's from 1985, and that hurts me. But I'll put the information in the description if you would like to keep an eye out for it. It does pop up on eBay occasionally. Somebody will probably eventually scan it and put it on Etsy, because that's how Etsy works these days. Get my threads sorted there. The fabric is from Spotlight, both sides. I'll put a link to it in the description as well if you're interested in this fabric, because I think it's terrific. It's it's a little bit retro, which I like. And I'm just, you know, Big Frog is not perfect, but Big Frog is fantastic, and I'm in love with him. And I'm so glad I made Big Frog. Big Frog took longer than he needed to because life, but now I have a Big Frog and I feel complete. This is what happens when you put me in a onesie. And I mean, of course I have a frog onesie. I mean, there should never have been any doubt that I would own a frog onesie. But that is Big Frog and the adventures of Big Frog, and I'm so pleased with my Big Frog that I'm going to go and cuddle my Big Frog for a little bit longer and then edit this video together, which is going to take a while. But you take care of yourself. You have a lovely rest of your week. Thank you so much for watching my blathering excitement about a big stuffed animal, because I am an adult. I will see you next time. Take care and bye for now. And one more look here. And my Big Frog. Look at the size of my frog. He's amazing.